So the definition of being sex positive and sex positivity is understanding that what works for you may not work for me, and what works for me may not work for you. Mm-hmm. So it's acknowledging that everyone kind of has autonomy and the right to their own sex life and body, as long as it's not like hurting someone else. So I think that's really important to remember, is allowing people to kind of do what they want to do and not judge them for it.
I'm Zack.
And I'm Abigail.
And together, we're fucking up.
And getting help from the pros so that you don't have to.
This is adulting. Ooh, I feel like we need like Cinderella, I actually think. Ooh.
I want some sparkly dust to fall on me right now. That's my fantasy.
That's your fantasy? I mean,
as I'm orgasming, sparkles fall from the ceiling.
Just a climax with fireworks and confetti shooting out. Pew, pew, pew.
Pew, pew.
Is that really one of your fantasies?
I mean, now it is. Actually, I think that'd be a vibe for sure.
Right? There should be fireworks. I mean, it should feel like a KY jelly commercial if you're going to be climaxing.
I mean, it feels like it. It should look like it, you know?
It should. So today we're talking all about fetishes and fantasies, and apparently there are differences between the two, and we shouldn't be embarrassed to talk about them.
Yeah, I didn't really realize the difference until this episode.
I know, we learn a lot, and you're about to learn a lot as well. We're diving into fetishes. We're sharing some of our own fetishes and some of our own fantasies, and they're not always as porny as people think that they are.
Pornographic. They're not always as out there. They're not always, it's not always glitter falling from the ceiling as you're orgasming. It can be way more chill.
Exactly. They don't need to be that deep. They just need to get you off.
Right.
Shall we?
We shall.
Typically, I look at fantasy as just something that you're kind of curious about, something that might turn you on a little bit, where as a fetish is something that you need to have in place in order to experience sexual pleasure. So you sort of have this sense of if I don't have this thing, if I don't have role playing, if I don't have a little pain play, if I don't have the leather involved, it's really hard for me to experience sexual pleasure and to get true enjoyment out of it. So fetishes, in that really specific sense, are actually pretty rare. Fantasies are much more common, and even people somebody might playing with a little leather whip here and there, but still be able to have tons of enjoyable experiences without one.
Okay.
The dominant religions are one that tend to be not to be opposing of kinks or fetishes, or really for sex, for anything that's outside of heterosexual marriage for the point of procreation, right? That's a lot of, Christian and puritanical morals, and that was kind of what our society was based off of. So I think that's a big element, and it's a pervasive cultural and societal thing. And we're brought up with this idea of this is what sex is. It's not that sex is supposed to be pleasurable. It's not that it's supposed to be fun or unique or different or satisfy these needs. We're just taught that sex is to procreate. And besides that, sex is really hush hush. So I think that in large part, kind of our Christian backgrounds helps to explain why kinks and fetishes are so stigmatized. Another thing is the fact that up until recently, 10, 15, 20 years ago max, most therapists and medical professionals and psychologists and psychiatrists pathologized most kinks and fetishes. They thought of BDSM as being something that's something is wrong for you for wanting to engage in this. They thought it was this rare deviant abnormality, and it's something where the DSM only recently changed their sadomasochism. DSM, which is the Bible for psychiatrists for diagnosing disorders and personality disorders and stuff like that, only recently changed the sadomasochism from it to be hey, it's an issue only if it's causing an issue in your life. If it's something where you're doing things non-consensually, if it's something that you are missing work or hurting your friends, it has to be a bad thing in your life, but in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with it. So you have this like Christian reason why. You have medical professionals up until very recently being like, this is deviant, this is abnormal, something is wrong with you. So you're kind of getting hit from both. Originally, it was like the science side and the religion side. You're getting hit from all sides saying that kinks and fetishes are wrong or deviant.
What are your personal fetishes?
What do I have to answer here? No, I don't know. I am
destigmatization.
Right? No, of course, but you still get nervous. I feel like I'm into a range of things. I like fisting guys for sure. I like threesomes. I like a lot of like splashing and food play. Not so much into piss or scat or that, but I love like deep throating. I love it when someone like pukes on my dick from deep throating so hard. I think that's so fucking hot. I'm into like most BDSM stuff, being tied up, tying people up, spanking, role play. Yeah.
Is there anything you're not into? I feel like everything's on the table.
Don't piss on it. You're not into pissing.
I mean, if
it happens, it happens, but you're not going to ask for it.
There are people who are really into piss, and I'm like, yeah, I can pee on you. That's fine. Yeah. It doesn't do anything for me. Scat is a hard no for me personally. Okay. But again, most things I'm down to try once or twice. And I'm definitely someone who's like, I get turned on by seeing how turned on you are. So if you're into something that's weird or different, I'm like, well, I'm happy to explore that because that really turns me on to see how much how excited you get. I say I'm into most things, and then it's like people talk to me, well, are you into this? I'm like, well, okay, I take it back. I'm not into most things. So like, if you ask the right ones, I'll be like, no, that's a hard no for me. But in terms of the more like standard ones that people think of, I'm down for most of them.
I think for me, when it comes to, and I don't even know if this would be considered a fetish, but like for me, I feel like in life and in my work, I'm more of an alpha that like in bed, I want a man that can take control, pick me up, throw me against the wall, choke me a little bit. Like I want you to like take control in the bedroom. I have to make too many fucking decisions throughout the day that at the end of the day, I want to come home and I want you to handle business. So I like that more dominant partner. Sure. And then in terms of like fetishes, I don't even know if this would be considered a fetish, but it's definitely a preference. I need to have a guy that has nice hands and nice feet. I'm not into feet in the sense that, like, I'm going to suck your toes. I don't want to suck your toes, but I need you to just have really nice manicured feet or pedicured feet.
Have you ever sucked toes?
I have once, and I probably won't do it. It just doesn't do anything to me. Sucking toes doesn't do anything for me. I've had guys suck my toes before, and like that feels good. I don't mind if like you're into feet and you want to suck my toes. I don't want to suck a guy's toes, but I just want you to have nice looking feet.
I totally support you on that.
Yeah, you don't want Fred Flintstone in your bed.
No.
Right.
I don't want to feel your calluses. Like, I just want you to have nice looking feet. And I want to be able to look at them and then be like, okay, those look like nice, good man feet. I don't need to suck them. I don't need to do anything with them, but I just need them to look nice.
I'm here for that. And I guess, I mean, if these are fetishes, I thought we were talking about like 50 Shades of Grey kind of thing.
I feel like,
I don't have 50 Shades of Grey fetishes.
Now I'm confused because like, she was saying like fantasies are different than fetishes. Fetishes are things you can't have sex without.
I can have sex with a guy with ugly feet. So for me, that is a no.
That's a fetish. Yeah. Nice feet. But like I can pretty much get off in any circumstance. So I don't know that I have a fetish.
You're just open to all of them.
Yeah. Maybe that's a fetish that I have none. I'm like, whatever.
Is there something that you really need a guy to do in bed?
They have to go down on me or otherwise like I can't. And that's like a percentage of women who cannot do penetration orgasms. Like I need them to. And also it's like kind of, it excites me because I feel like they're super interested when they like go to do that and they like want to please me and they want to do a good job. And like, Sex with Emily always says, like, there's no time limit. They need to prepare to be down there for a while because it's not the Satisfier Pro, unfortunately.
It's not.
It doesn't happen in a minute to like half a song. It takes several songs sometimes.
That's one thing I don't enjoy because like I love getting eaten out, but like don't go down there for 10 seconds and then think you're going to penetrate me. Like if you're going to go downtown Judy Brown, then you need to like do it. Like commit to it.
Right. Exactly. So I would say, I mean, if that's a fetish, then, but I just thought that was
a fetish. I think that's fair.
The issue that I see a lot with people around fantasies is that they hear the word fantasy and they think that it needs to be something that's like incredibly complex and specific and very detailed. A lot of times people will think of like very detailed role-playing fantasies, like, okay, it's the 18th century, we're in England in the countryside, like I'm the lady of the manor and you're my like, you know, field worker or something. You know, like people go to this really specific place in their heads. And I think that a fantasy can really be so much simpler than that. Like it can just be anything that you're curious about or anything that like sounds kind of sexy to you. So I like to encourage people to just like shrink down that idea of fantasy. So a fantasy could be something like you don't know that you'll necessarily like it. You may not ever even want to try it in real life. You may just like kind of playing with it in your head. I mean, definitely if it is something more specific, like if you have a foot fetish or you're really into leather or whatever it is, that's cool too. But I think for a lot of people, it's just recognizing like fantasy doesn't have to be that complex. It's okay for us to have like more mild fantasies or smaller fantasies.
Is there a fetish that you come across more so than others? Like, is there something that you find more common with couples?
Definitely the most common one is foot fetish. There are a lot of people, straight men in particular, who tend to have foot fetishes. So that's definitely like by far and away the most common one.
BDSM is probably the most common one. And that's very encompassing of so many things. But, you know, tied up, being tied up, spanking, role play, just an element of like dom sub, whether it's daddy son or master slave or whatever it is that you're into, I think is very common. I think a desire for threesomes are very common. You notice that a lot of like for like fetish objects, a lot of them have to do with like feet is like kind of a big one you see a lot of. So it's whether it is like shoes, feet, a lot of like, or something like clothing that surrounds the genitals. So whether it's bras, panties, pantyhose, stuff like that are kind of the main fetish objects that people are into. But you see a lot of feet stuff. You see a lot of armpits.
I gave a foot job one time.
Explain.
Like fully jacked a dude off with my feet. It was so weird.
I don't understand how that gets anybody off.
Also, how
Me
long
either.
do you do that? Do your ankles hurt?
It was like a moment.
You need
in
coordination.
Time. It was not for me.
And what is the psychology behind foot fetishes? Because it is so like, what is it about feet that people love so much?
I wish I had a great answer for that, but we don't really know. Shockingly, the government won't give a ton of research money to sex researchers to explore why people are so into toes.
Well, because we know that we know that you know, private parts are sexualized and we have to cover them up. And that's why there's like that, you know, we're attracted to them. But like, people have feet all that, like people just are like wear flip-flops every day. That
some people should have their feet covered up.
Some people need pedicures.
Well, if they're covered up, maybe that's the reason.
I know, maybe that's why you're into it. Like,
true, right? What's underneath the sneakers?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are some ideas that some people have, like maybe there's this kind of theme around subservience, like, you know, kissing somebody's feet or really like bowing down to them. Some people think maybe it's about the fact that feet are kind of like typically seen as smelly and a little bit icky, but there's not really any crystal clear, like scientific understanding that we have of like, oh, this is why people get so into feet.
I don't know if you know the work of Justin Lehmiller. He's like, he works at the Kinsey Institute and he's has a PhD and he specifically studies kinks and fetishes. That's like all he studies. One thing he always talks about is the fact that like how important research is because when you look at research, you realize how common all of this shit is. And when it is more common, it helps you feel quote unquote normal. And the thing is, even if it's not common, that doesn't mean you're abnormal, right? It just means it's not common. But I think in recognizing that, like, the vast majority of fetishes or kinks, you know, half of the people in the world have, 30% of the world have, and like almost everyone has some form of kink or fetish, can really help you feel more comfortable and embracing of your sexuality and your fetishes and your kinks. So I think there's such an important need also, in addition to all these articles about it, but to actually have research showing this and to have medical professionals being like, hey, this is common, and you are healthy and you are normal. And even if you're into something that's really uncommon, it can still be healthy and normal because it's an indicator. But even if you have an uncommon kink or fetish, it still usually relates back to power, dominance, submission. It's all in the realm of something that is normal. You know what I mean? It's all normal. It's all healthy.
I'm like you, Zach, where I would love for someone to just like dominate, but like I'm also so type A that I end up dominating, and like people like they just let me, and I'm like, if it's like a 1 or 2 time hookup, fine, whatever. But like long term wise, like I make it very known. I'm like, just like, you know, take over. But like I also like love my ears. So like that might be a fetish. Like I love when people like lick my ears and like bite my ears and like pull my hair.
I hate my ears being touched.
I fucking love that.
I don't.
I love it too, and my neck.
Yeah. Like, my neck, yes. The neck,
like right here.
Yeah, I freak out. Like this general.
If anyone's watching, just right here.
Right.
I'm trying to think of like fetishes.
I like love when someone breathes into my ears too. Like I just think it's so hot.
Oh no, nothing to do with my ears. I don't like anything with my ears. My ears, and I don't like my balls being played with. I know a lot of guys enjoy that. For me, that's a hard no. I did, in terms of fetishes, I did one time pee on a guy because he was really into that.
Okay.
I've been peed on. It's awful.
Is this something you asked for though? Like, Abigail, did this just happen to you? Did someone
No, he wanted to do it. I was like, fuck yeah, because I told you I don't. My fetish is I have none. So I'm like, sounds good. And then I was like, this is damp. Like, it's not fun.
Well, also, where did someone pee on you? In the shower or just like in a place that then has to be cleaned up?
It was in the shower, but it was like still like, I don't know. It was just like something. I felt dirty.
Yeah, it has to be done in the shower because the guy that I did it with, he was like, he like brought it up beforehand. Like he brought it up a few times and he brought it up beforehand. And I was kind of like, okay. And then he kept bringing it up. So I was like, okay, this is something he really wants to do. And then finally we were in bed and, you know, he was like, do we still want to do this? And I was like, we should probably move to the shower because we're not going to do this in my bed. Yeah, if someone peed
in my bed, I would fucking murder them.
Hard no. And so I was like, okay, like I'll pee on you. But then he like made me pee in his mouth, which to me was just like, and I'm not trying to kink shame anybody, but like I would never want somebody else's urine in my mouth. He didn't swallow it, he spit it out. But like it was just a very different experience for me. And again, I don't want to kink shame anybody, but it was just something that did nothing for me.
I feel like too, like I would draw the line of like shitting on me. Like no way.
Yeah, I can't get into that.
No way.
I'm glad we're drawing lines.
How do you recommend talking to a partner about exploring a specific fetish?
Again, I think it comes down to make sure you talk about the stuff outside of the bedroom. I think it's very important. People always like to talk about sex like right before having sex or when they're doing it. Be like, oh, let's just do this. It's like, let's take a step back here. You know, when you're talking to your partner, it's always can be slightly awkward to be like, hey, you know, I'm interested in trying some new things in bed. I was reading, again, it's always good to say I was reading an article.
Like, right.
Like, I feel like it's a very good
someone else
point.
Someone else is doing it, so that's why it was brought to my attention.
Yeah, so that way it's less random for you bringing it up. But being like, no, I read this thing on BDSM. I thought it was interesting. I'd be interested in exploring something. Are there any desires that have been untapped or fantasies that you haven't done? And again, I think it's really good to open the conversation. You can talk a little bit about yourself, but then really seeing what they're into as well, because I think there's often a lot of overlap that you might not even recognize. But, once you kind of get the conversation going, if you have like a desire for a more, I'll say, intense or out there kink, I wouldn't necessarily lead with that. Start with slow things to get into it, being like, hey, I saw this. I'd be down to try role play. Are you into role play? Yeah, like most people are into role play. That's a very mild one. From there, what else would you be into? They say what else they're into. And then they say, what else would you be into? And then you could, slowly work your way up to the more intense stuff.
I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that vulnerability is a part of a smoking hot sex life. Like, we have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. If we only did the things that felt comfortable to us, like we wouldn't really
do much.
Yeah.
Right.
Same thing over and over again. So I think, it's important to just normalize, like, yeah, it's uncomfortable to be vulnerable. Nobody's out here like, let me get extra vulnerable tonight. But it's really important for us to normalize that. One of my favorite techniques is to tell your partner that you had a dream about it. You don't have to have had a dream about it. It can be a little white lie, but just say like, oh, I had a dream about this thing. I've never thought about it before, but that dream is pretty sexy.
Yeah.
I love that. Someone else we were talking to was like, just say you read about it.
Yeah.
Like, I read about this. And it's like, put the blame on somebody else. So they're not like, you freak.
Put the blame on the Adulting Podcast. I heard it on the Adulting Podcast.
I heard it on the podcast.
And I was curious.
At the end, we'll just like run through all the different fantasies. So they're like, yeah, I actually did hear it.
I did hear it.
Yeah, we may use that strategy on our own Instagram. So blame it on us. You were listening to our story and you heard it.
Yeah.
So on that same note, what happens if you're in a relationship and obviously, we don't love to be vulnerable or talk about things, especially sexually. And so we tend to go a little more vanilla missionary at the beginning, but let's say we do have fetishes and we're maybe a few months into the relationship, and to us, maybe a foot fetish is really important, but maybe to our partner, they're like, I don't want you to touch my feet. It makes me uncomfortable. What do you do in that sort of instance where you have one partner that really is into something and the other partner's like, I really am not into that? And how do you work through that?
Well, first I want to give some reassurance to people that I've found that we tend to be a lot more open to our partner's desires than I think like you would imagine. A lot of us get really freaked out, or like, oh, I don't want to tell my partner that I want to try this because they won't like it. They'll think I'm so weird. But I think people are actually more open-minded than we think. That being said, like, there definitely are situations where there's just going to be an incompatibility between two people. Like, if someone is, there's something that's so central to their experience and they're like, I really cannot enjoy myself or fully be like, I feel like I'm being my authentic self in this relationship, and the other person's like, I'm sorry, I have like a hard boundary around that. I won't do that. Like, that's probably a relationship, unfortunately, that's just not going to work out. Or the other option is to allow each other to explore your fantasies and your fetishes outside of the relationship. I definitely have worked with couples where they've said, what we have is something really special, and we're fine with creating this little outside container for us to explore, get our sexual needs met because we're getting so many of our other needs met with each other.
Yeah. And then fortunately, for people who are single, I think that if you identify a certain fetish as being like super key to you being happy and fulfilled sexually, like there are options these days for finding, for getting into a relationship where those fetishes are disclosed from the very beginning.
Yeah, there are a lot of apps now where people are just like, I think that's what's really amazing about the gay community is there's a lot more openness about like, this is what I'm into. What are you into? And it's such a more straightforward conversation. Obviously, I'm speaking in like really broad, generalizations here, but I think there's a lot more openness to just share those kinds of things up front than there are in like heterosexual relationships.
Interesting.
Just never shame them, right? Be like, oh, it's not necessarily something I'm interested in. But I love that you have that. And then you can always be like, is there figuring out what the underlying root or desire of that kink was? So was it something that had to do with power play? And you're like, okay, well, I'm not necessarily into that, but actually another thing that's potentially into power play, I'd actually be willing to do this. So maybe you can find some form of similar kink or fetish that you'd be comfortable doing.
I once had a guy on a whatever first date it was. He said that he was like Christian Grey without the billions. And I was like,
bye.
So what does that mean?
That means bye.
Like, no, he was like, well, I'm into like whips and chains and things, but I just don't have money. And I was like,
do you have a job?
Yeah. And he has a kid and the whole thing. And I was like really confused by his positioning. And because we just had like a very like benign date at like a poke restaurant during daylight. And then I got this text like later on at night. It was a different person. It was like a guy with an OnlyFans account. I was like, where did this person just come from? And then I responded and I was like, okay, I don't think I'm into that. And he's like, well, do you have any friends who might be? And I was like, what? Is this really happening? You just asked me in the same beat if any of my friends would be into your stuff that you're into. And you told me you don't have billions. I'm not your matchmaker. No, unless you're going to pay me to matchmake you with somebody who's into that. I see no benefit in this conversation. And then he went away, but he still tries to match with me to this day.
Ooh. For me, I love like making a sex tape. Like that to me is like, but like it has to be on my phone. I have to be in full control of what's going on. My face can't be in it. But like to me, that's enjoyable. And if there's ever a point where a dude's willing to have sex in my windows, I might be down for that. Like I don't know why. Like I don't mind putting on like some type of show.
I love sex in public places.
Ooh.
Like, but like, or if like someone people don't know that you're like if you're like, for instance, one was like on a deck above where like everyone is eating.
Oh.
And so like we were like fucking above them, but it was like, oh, you have to be quiet and like you don't want people to hear you fuck. Like, I don't know. It was just like, I think that's kind of hot.
I agree with both of those things actually. Now that you're bringing them up, it's just been a while, so I forgot that this is done.
Right?
So yes, the sex tape thing I actually think is fun, and even though it doesn't look like what it looks like in porn, I think it's kind of fun to like make that and then have that and then watch it and then like refer to the thing you did like together, that experience you had. Because Lord knows my brain can remember it, and like in my head I can see it like it's a sex tape. And I envision myself in these scenarios. So like actually having me to watch and like, well, not me, but the person in action sounds hot just to have as like a takeaway, but like a prize that you get to keep. But also like having sex in places that you're not supposed to, or at weird times where like other people could walk in potentially or hear you.
Yeah. Like Zack in Chicago.
Oh yeah. When his wife could have walked in.
With the married man.
Yeah. So romantic.
I want to talk about the psychology behind fetishes, because you kind of brought this up a little earlier about how, you know, now we're starting to see the medical books be updated. But do you think that these fetishes are linked to deeper psychological, like is there a psychological connection to it? Or do you think it's more of a physical bodily pleasure?
I mean, there has to be some form of psychological connection, because they always say, you know, the mind is the biggest sex organ or whatever it is, right? Or whatever. But like, you know, in terms of being aroused by something like cars or being aroused by dirt or whatever it is, like, yeah, that's not necessarily inherently sexualized. That's not something that feels good because there's pressure on your penis, so it's not physical. So there always is some form of psychological component. But also, I think a lot of people look so deep into their kinks or desires or fetishes when it's like, you don't need to. Like, if you enjoy it and you do it safely and you do it consensually and your partners are into it, like, okay, so you're into something more out there. You're into being more dominant and smacking your partner, but it's only during sex. You're like, this mean I'm a bad person. This mean I have anger issues. It's because I was smacked as a kid. And I'm letting, it's like, fucking enjoy it. Like whatever it is, like you don't need to overcomplicate these things. I don't think it necessarily is indicative of like who you are as a person. You don't need to go into a deep psychoanalysis. Just enjoy it.
Okay. So I don't need therapy then.
No, you definitely need therapy, but probably not for this.
You need therapy, just not for your kinks, okay?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
there was this one guy that I was really into, and we were dating and we were talking for like several months. And he said that one of his fantasies was he wanted to go down on a woman. He didn't want to have sex with her, but he just wanted to go down on her just to see what that experience was like.
So interesting.
It is.
Because I don't ever wonder what it's like to go down on a woman.
I don't either, but I have wondered what it would be like to have one go down on me. And I'm like, would I feel weird about it? Would I be like, okay, I've actually had dreams about it. And I'm like, I wake up, I'm like, am I a lesbian or am I just lonely? At this point, I don't know.
Have you guys explored fantasies and fetishes in your relationship?
We have, we've talked about, a lot of our fantasies. I think definitely for us, we fall under that description of like, neither of us has a fetish and neither of us has a fantasy that's like, the 18th century.
Or the like
English
consumes, like nothing that
Yeah.
consumes our thoughts where it was like, I'm like not getting enough pleasure unless we enact this thing.
But we played with like we played with role playing, we've played with toys, we've played with, it's like some light sensation play type of stuff. So, I mean, I try to make us guinea pigs for a lot of stuff. I'm like, I got to test this out and see if we can recommend it to other people or not. But yeah,
I kind of find like a lot of pretty much everything we try is enjoyable. And it's like, I can see aspects of it where I'm like, this is hot. Like this, brought me a different sensation or was fun in that moment. But then kind of what I find is later on, I'm not like craving that. I'm not like, let's go back.
I need to have this.
Set that up again. It's sort of like, that was fun. That was unique. And, let's just kind of leave it there as like a unique thing that we do occasionally.
Yeah.
I really, really want to go to a sex party. I've never done that. And that is like for sure, like goal.
Would you suck a guy's, at a party, would you be like sucking some dude's dick in front of everybody?
Like if it was a sex party, yeah. If it was not a sex party, fuck no. But like if it was like, if everyone went there for that purpose, I would have zero problems. And
just
that's like I think that's just why I want to go. Like just naked, like, or whatever, in a dress, whatever. And I just think that's so dope that like everyone's just like, that's what I'm here for. Like everyone's just themselves. No one has to pretend like, oh, like maybe I'll go home with him and then like figure it out in the elevator. Like you don't even have to go home with them. You just go home and sleep well.
Oh my God, I love it. Well, thank you guys. Abigail, did you have any other last questions before we let them go?
We covered a lot. I love that. We got a lot of the top questions out too. So I think people have a place to start. And if they have further inquiries, where can they find you guys for those?
Yeah, so we would love to connect with anyone in your audience. The two best places to find us first are on our website at vmtherapy.com. It's my initials. We have tons of information about all of our courses that we offer. We have tons of courses that help people, solve common sexual challenges and have better sex, like all from the comfort and privacy of your own home. And tons of like free guides, blog posts, all kinds of stuff.
If you want to go straight to the free stuff, it's vmtherapy.com/free.
And then we are also
easy enough.
Yeah, we're also really active on Instagram. Our handle is Vanessa Marin Therapy, and we do daily stories together, talking about like funny, embarrassing stuff from our own relationship. Lots of practical tips. We have tons of like highlights with different like free guides and funny stuff. So yeah, come over there, send us a DM, and say hi, and let us know you found us through the podcast.
Love it. Thank you guys. We really appreciate your honesty and your candor and like your insight.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. It was a lot of fun.
We always learn so much from you, Vanessa. We really do.
Oh,
I've never learned so much about vaginas. Information that's going to be so helpful.
He didn't even want to be.
Wow, I learned so much this week.
So much.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in to The Adulting Podcast. As always, you can give us a follow at The Adulting Podcast or go to theadultingpodcast.com to stay up to date with the latest show news. As you can see, we got a little bit of a facelift. We have new cover art. We have a new logo. Our website has been revamped. So we are fully brand new, and we're ready to share it with you. So give us a follow at the Adulting Podcast. If you want to keep up with me, you can follow me at Just Plain Zack.
And if you want to keep up with me, which I know you all want to, you can follow me at Abigail _AF.
Yes, give Abigail a follow, give me a follow, give the show a follow. And if you want to follow any of our guests, you can give Vanessa Marin a follow at Vanessa Marin Therapy. Give Jennifer Golden a follow at Jennifer Golden. Or you can follow Complicated Show. And you can give Zachary Zane a follow. He posts a lot of like thirsty thirst traps on his Instagram stories at Zachary Zane _. Thank you for following us on this Sex-capade journey this month, everybody. Until next time, we'll be...
#adulting.